Hey y'all, and welcome back. I'm Ashley, and thank you for joining me today. I have to make a confession. I have fallen in a huge reading slump, and I have only read one book so far in August, and we are the majority of the way through August, so this is really bad for me when I've only read one book. So I have this nice stack of books over here that I had wanted to read this month, and I really don't think that I'm going to get through all of them, but I just haven't had the motivation to pick up any of them. And I'm not sure if it's so daunting because it seems like such a large book stack, or if it's some other reason that I'm just not feeling motivated to read. But today I wanted to give myself a little bit of a challenge to go through and read the first chapter in each of these books and to pick one of them from the first chapter that seems the most intriguing and read that one through, and then figure out at the end if the first chapter was a good indicator for the whole book or if it was just a really good first chapter and the rest of the book flopped. So we will see, but I have 5 books here. Some of them are sequels to books that I have already read, so I kind of know what I'm getting into for those books, but the other ones are new. I have never heard of them. I've read a little bit about them in order to purchase them, but I've never really looked into them or read reviews on them or anything, so they're going to be more of like a blind book. So let's just go ahead and get into the reading and let's see what I pick. So the first chapter of this could change everything. This could change everything. Is really interesting. So it's an older woman in her 80s. I think she said she's 83. She is watching a young boy. Well, to her, he's young. He's like 16. He is in a market across from where she's sitting, and she sees him as he is about to shoplift. He is going to shoplift an apple. And so it's a very odd thing to shoplift. So she calls to him and tells him to come get more money and just buy a whole bag of them. So he comes over there and he gets money from her, and he goes back and buys the bag of apples, which he buys Pink Lady apples, which happen to be my favorite, so that's pretty cool. But buys the bag of apples and brings them back to her. So she invites him to sit down at the little cafe that she is sitting at, and they end up chatting and talking about bucket lists and what you would do if you were to create a bucket list. And he had a few things, including that he would buy a year's membership to the zoo, which they also happen to be sitting close to. And so when she gets back home, before she goes back home, she has him walk to her car with her, and she's going to tip him for carrying all of her grocery bags and everything, but she didn't have any change left. So she gets his address and she ends up buying him a membership to the zoo and putting a 10-pound note in the envelope, and I think another little handwritten note. And she mails it off to him. So that was the first chapter. I know I read the back of the book when I bought this at the bookstore, but I don't really remember what it was about, really. And so the first chapter is very interesting. But it's not one of the attention grabbers. So we'll see what the other ones are like, but I mean, it could go anywhere, I feel like. So the second book, the first chapter from the second book that I read is A Secret to Southern Charm, and this is actually the second book in a series, so it is picking up where the first book left off, where one of the sisters' husbands is MIA, and it's, again, not one of those like really like catching first chapters, but it's pretty decent. And I know that this book is probably going to be funny because the first book was like a Southern humor type of funny, so it is definitely on the like I want to read it list, but we'll see if something else grabs my attention more. So this one definitely piqued my interest a little bit more. It's called Swimming Lessons. It is also the second book in the series. This is about Toy, who is a character from the first book, but she has become a aquarist. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but she works at the aquarium, and she is out on the beach with her daughter when she sees something in the water, and so she goes out to try and figure out what it is, but when she's out there she scrapes her toe on a shell in the water and ends up cutting her toe, and as she's like out there, she cuts her toe, she sees what it is in the water, and it ends up being a sea turtle. And so she's trying to get the sea turtle back to the beach, but when she starts kicking and swimming trying to get the sea turtle back, she realizes there's also a shark following them, so it's kind of a race to try to get her and the turtle back to the beach before the shark can get them. So they end up making it, but the turtle is pretty badly like damaged and hurt. It has a lot of like crustaceans on its shell and leeches, and it just sounds like it's in a bit of very bad situation. So they call in some help, and they are just now figuring out what to do with the turtle overnight until they can get it to the aquarium or a hospital or anything. This first chapter was definitely more action and more energy than the first two books that I read, so this is definitely a high contender. This is so far like what I would probably end up reading, but I still have 2 more books to go through and read the first chapter for, so we will see if this is still my number 1 by the end. Okay, so this one actually has a prologue, but it's only a page and a half. So I read that, and I'm going to read chapter 1. The prologue is interesting. I think I read the description of this before I got this in my book of the month, but the prologue is just very interesting. Just from the prologue, I'm definitely have my curiosity piqued. Let's see what chapter 1 does. Okay, so the first chapter of, well, I read the prologue and the first chapter, and it definitely makes me want to continue reading. It is definitely one of those like catching chapters that like kind of grips you when you first read it, but it doesn't give a lot, which I think is why it grips you, that you're wanting to learn more. So it's a mother that checks into a hotel and she's been gripped by a tragedy. And that's about what I know so far. So this is definitely giving, right now, I am between these two as far as the next book that I want to read, but we still have one more. So this is the last book, Not a Happy Family. In the first, in the prologue, there's been a murder. And in the first chapter, we meet all of the children. So it's definitely very interesting. I mean, because it is a book where you're going to be solving a murder, I think that kind of makes it a little bit more gripping, especially in the first chapter, to be like, did any of the children do it? But I think that I will wait to take this one to the beach with me, because this does seem like a perfect beach read as far as just like having something super entertaining for the beach. So I'm going to set this one aside. So that leaves When the Stars Go Dark and Swimming Lessons. So I have the book that I chose, which is Swimming Lessons by Mary Alice Monroe, and I am hoping that this is going to be a great book. If not, I definitely have a few others to choose from now that I kind of have a better idea going into them, at least for some of them. So come back at the end of the month to see what I thought about Swimming Lessons and see if I thought that the rest of the book was just as good as the first chapter. And thank you so much for joining me today. I will see y'all again soon. Bye guys.